One night in September during the summer of 1986, a friend of Len's named Clara told him she had some weed. This was quite the rarity in Italy. Apparently someone had given her 2 huge bags of it. Len called Mark to bring down his mom's Mercedes convertible so they could show Clara a good time since she was giving them 2 huge bags of weed. Mark was excited when Clara showed the big bag of weed that she had flashed in front of Len. It was usually hard to get the Mercedes from his mom, but Mark had it and was ready to show off. Len proposed they take Clara for a ride in it. It would just be a joyride, and then head back to September's bar. Clara thought the car was beautiful. A Mercedes was beyond the average person's budget in Italy. There were so many taxes, high insurance, and very expensive premium gas required to own a car like this. They had pounded a few beers before hitting the road, and they were off to a long strip to test out the car's top speed. Everything with the boys had been about speed since they were 14, always trying to soup up or modify their mopeds to go faster. There was a long road that ran by the American housing area and eventually ended at the entrance to the autostrada. Mark ran through the gears, and Clara held onto the safety handle for dear life. Len was in the back egging Mark on to go faster, faster, faster. The Mercedes roared up to 185 kilometers per hour, which was 114 miles per hour. It felt pretty fast, and they would have gone faster if they had not run out of road. Mark ripped a U-turn at the end of the road at 60 miles per hour and started accelerating in the opposite direction. Suddenly, there were police lights flashing behind their car, and the Mercedes was not outrunning them. Mark slowed down, pulling over to the side of the road. An Italian carabinieri officer jumped out and slammed his pistol butt on the hood of the car. They demanded the boys and Clara turn around and park by the huge parking area near the autostrada tolls. Inside the car, Mark was getting paranoid, yelling at Len to throw the huge bag of weed out of the window. Len said that was a stupid idea since the cops had a spotlight on them, which was 1 car length behind. It was about half a mile to the parking lot, and trying to throw a big bag of weed out the window, then trying to say it was some rotten lettuce would not work. Then things got even more interesting. Clara said there was another problem, and pulled out another huge bag of weed before they got to the parking lot. Len grabbed the weed from her and said he would find a way to hide it in the back of the car. They were about to pull over next to 8 other police vehicles, which include dates. Len was buzzed, running a split-second strategy through his mental escape plan algorithm. Len decided to pull a very abstract diversion and told Mark and Clara what to do. Len said if they got caught, he would take all the blame, but he was going to Len and Mark were just spoiled American assholes trying to show off. Len told Mark to jump up and complain about the American MP soldiers not being there. Mark's job was to be loud and obnoxious, pulling attention off Len, who would stay in the car. Len told Clara and Mark that he too would play the ugly American tourist and weed under the passenger seat and was wearing a trench coat. The weed was smelling up the car, so Len started chain-smoking cigarettes in the car to cover it up, even though Mark's mom had a no-smoking policy in the Mercedes. The cops were falling for the attention that Clara was giving them. It played into the psychology of Italian machismo. Mark was being annoying and loud, and the police kept telling him to shut up. The weed from under the seat and shoved it into the front of his pants when no one was looking. Then he took off his trench coat, leaving it in the car, like he had forgotten it, and he was worried they might search it. It looked like a drunk, belligerent American teenager, shaking his well-endowed gift to make the cops feel inferior. The intent was to make them not want to get near it, especially after their flirting with Clara. After the big weed wang waving, the cops stayed away from Len and left him to smoke his cigarette, focusing more on Clara and Mark. Then Len heard they would search the car. He knew they were going for the back seat and into his trench coat. They just saw a guy with a huge bulge in his pants and a t-shirt who probably had nothing on him. They searched the car and found nothing. Then gave Mark and Len a stern warning, all the while telling Clara they might look her up after their shift. The car rolled out of the parking lot, with Len sitting in the back. Mark and Clara asked what Len had done with the weed, and Len put Clara's hand on his huge bulge. She jumped back in shock, thinking Len was being a pervert, and was just plain crazy to act this way after being pulled over by the cops. Len roared with laughter, and told her that he had been actually showing her where the weed had been hidden. Mark was laughing too, and they headed back to September's to drop off Clara, who was relieved for not getting arrested. Mark took off home, and Len bounced around a few bars, drinking trading drinks for handfuls of weed. The next day, Len went out to Mark's house to have a smokeout. And this is where they found the weed had been sprayed with strychnine or something because it was weak. You could smoke 8 joints of this weed, and it did hardly anything more than oregano might. To think they could have been arrested for weed that had been killed of its magic powers had a crappy outcome. You get away with something, but you actually end up getting away with nothing. The police would have booked them, and it may or may not be discovered later that the weed had very dismal THC content or potency. In a way, throwing it out the window like Mark had asked Len with the cops behind them would have almost been equivalent to throwing out some rotten lettuce. As the summer moved on, Kevin would leave first, and soon to be followed by Mark taking the big plane back to the world. It was ironic that the kids living in Italy on an army base would think of the USA as that place that had it all. Italy had plenty of wonderful things itself: the food, the wine, the architecture, and one amazing culture.